Paul, Tom Elmore, Leah Glazer, Andy Horowitz, and Sarah Nelson. We have a quorum. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's format and review of public comment procedures. Given the online format of today's meeting, and for those who are visitors today, I want to review and explain our procedures. The order of presentation. I'll read each motion and ask for the motion to be moved and seconded.
Stupid
Staff
thing.
will present the agenda item to the council. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and if called upon by staff or representative of the organization, may offer statements or address council's questions. For members of the public who wish to speak to the agenda item, we ask that you identify yourself and your affiliation. After all questions have been addressed and statements made, a roll call vote will be taken. If members of the public have letters and or written statements they wish to submit to the record, please email them to Jonathan Kinney at the email address Jonathan, JONATHAN.Kinney, KINNEY @ct.gov. The Historic Preservation Council takes statements from members of the public but does not respond to questions. Lastly, please only address the particular agenda item being addressed at that time. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's policy regarding conflicts of interest. The Historic Preservation Council votes on matters which provide leadership, service, and economic benefits to property owners, consultants, local governments, and not-for-profit organizations. Given this responsibility and to maintain the highest professional standards, go to my page. In discharge of our duties, it's important to maintain a strong code of ethics for all council members and department employees. In order to avoid possible violations of the Department of Economic and Community Development ethics standards, it's necessary for the council to be aware of any situations in which there is a real, potential, or apparent conflict of interest involving anyone here. Conflict of interest may occur when a public official's participation in agency matters results in personal financial gain. All council and staff have been provided a copy of the Department of Economic and Community Development Ethics Standard Statement and concerning state statutes. Having reviewed them and today's agenda, members of the council or staff are now asked to disclose any affiliation with entities or projects that may create a conflict of interest as defined by agency policy pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes I-79 through I-89, entitled Code of Ethics for Public Officials. Once disclosed, the member or staff may recuse themselves from that particular agenda item. Having read the statement, are there any council or staff members that would like to disclose a conflict of interest to any of the items on today's agenda?
Hi, it's Leah, and I'm recusing from the Congregation Michigan Israel application because I submitted the application. I'm on the executive board of the synagogue. But the architect is here and will be able to answer questions.
Yep, thank you. Tom Elmore?
Yep, Paul, I need to recuse myself from the Ancient Burying Ground application VB1 as we're doing ongoing consulting there at the ABG.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? For council members being recused, please make sure that the staff has your cell phone number so staff can communicate with you via text message once the item is passed. Item 4A, the review of the May 3rd, 2023 meeting minutes. The meeting minutes were provided to the council members, and we've received some corrections from Tom. Are there any other corrections from anyone? May I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Sarah Nelson?
Thank you, Paul.
Sarah,
So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Some of these things may have already been picked up, but I just wanted two things. There's you're referred to as the chair, you're referred to as the vice chair, and the same thing with Tom in different places in the minutes. So to the extent of whatever your roles were, it should be consistent and accurate. And then the other thing, which is more substantive, which is for agenda item 5B4. That was an agenda item where we actually amended the motion to change the language describing what the grant scope was. So the minutes show that we voted on affirmative on the whole motion as it was originally presented. And then the minutes at the end show that we voted on the revision of the language. But in actually what we voted to amend the motion language, and then once it was amended, we voted on the amended motion. So it's a little bit confusing in the minutes here.
I'm happy to go through that and clarify that for you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So agreeing with those corrections, shall we approve the motion, the minutes as amended? Do the roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Vincenzia,
Aye.
Beth Burgess.
Aye.
I guess I will abstain. Tom Elmore,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
and Sarah Nelson.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Item 4B, the transcript part
Wow,
2.
they're really far ahead.
Hello? Somebody just jumped in. We did receive some comments from Marguerite for corrections of spelling of her name and a couple of grammatical errors. But Sarah, do we have to do a 2/3 vote to recall this item to the agenda? Oh, you're muted. Sarah, you're muted, Sarah.
Yes, if we tabled it, we have to recall it to the table.
Okay. We have a motion to bring this item back to the table.
So
Sarah
moved.
Nelson, second.
Beth
Tom.
Burgess. Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
Sarah Nelson moved and Beth Burgess second. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Vincenzia,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I guess I abstain. Tom Elmore,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
and Sarah Nelson.
Aye.
Okay, so it's now up for discussion. Are there any further corrections or comments to the transcript as submitted? Anyone? I don't see anybody's hands. Sarah, do you have a comment?
Only to ask Jonathan, going forward, you've had such trouble with this particular company. Are you now switching to another vendor?
We haven't discussed it in that level of detail. It's a possibility. There are others around, but this is the first time they've actually been notified that there have been any issues or corrections with their transcript. So we sort of had to figure out the mechanism for fixing that. So hopefully we'll be a little smoother sailing moving forward.
Okay. And Jonathan, the recording of the meeting is actually available alongside the transcript in the official repository of all of that information.
Yes, correct.
Because I guess the difference between a transcript and meeting minutes is that a transcript will reflect inaccurate wording and things like that, so the grammatical imperfections are meant to be carried as spoken, not literary
But
edits.
that's correct. Yeah, we had to work with them to identify, what was actually stated during the meeting versus what was intended to be stated, and they obviously wouldn't go back and correct things that were actually stated in the meeting because that reflects an accurate a record of the discussion. So,
Okay.
like I said, hopefully it'll be smoother sailing moving forward.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing no hands, we'll proceed to a vote to approve the transcripts as amended. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Vincenzia,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I'll abstain. Thomas Elmore,
Paul, I'm going to abstain.
thank you. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
I'll abstain.
and Sarah Nelson.
Aye.
So it's 5, 4, and 3 abstentions. I guess that motion carries.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving right along, the next item, item 5, the State Forest Preservation Grants. On unfinished items, we have none. And we'll move on to 5B.
Paul, I'm going to step
Item-
out for this first one.
Thank you, Tom. 5B1, I'll read the motion. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Ancient Burying Ground Association, project geophysical survey for human burials at the Ancient Burying Ground, 1640 to 1900 at 60 Gold Street, Hartford, in the amount of $5,000. Can I have a motion to move? Sarah Nelson,
So moved.
and a second.
Beth Burgess.
Thank you. Discussion?
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Mary. So staff recommends approval of this application. The Ancient Burying Ground just completed a grant-funded landscape study and also a conservation assessment of some table stones. And so before they start thinking about the next steps, implementing, recommendations, they want this survey to make sure they're not disturbing any unknown burials. So Christine Jewell with the Ancient Burying Ground Association is here to answer any questions that I can't.
And Mary, the total project is about 10,500, and they're asking just for the maximum 5,000 as their the grant
hold on.
contribution.
Let me pull up the application. I'm sorry.
It's 10,500.
Is that Christine?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Because we need
if-
Tom Elmore for basically he's going to manage the team. And he's an
Okay.
approved vendor.
Okay. So it's a non-matching grant. So yes, the first 5,000 and then anything over that. And as Christine said, Tom was competitively selected for the assessment, so he can continue to help manage any of the implementation of the recommendations.
Thank you. And any questions from council members?
I have one, Paul. There mentioned in the application that there might be a need for further GPR if the scope may expand. Can you talk a little bit about that process and the possibility of that happening?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can jump in for, Christine, do you want to?
Oh, sure.
Oh.
Well, I was just looking at part of the application. The total size of the Ancient Burying Ground is 1.3 acres. So we're not talking about a lot of land. And so we're hoping that the 1 acre maximum amount is going to be sufficient. But the Ancient Burying Ground, the board is supporting this project and is aware that dedicated funds may need to be added to expand on that. And so it's kind of like, until we actually get in there, we're not really sure what the situation is going to be. And so, yes, we're completely aware that the size of this land is a tiny bit larger than the amount that's awarded for this grant.
And this was resulting from conversations with our staff archaeologists. We, the 1 acre limit is just a general guideline. However, beyond the fence, there is additional ground, and we don't want to run the risk of not detecting anything that might be beyond. So,
Okay.
as Christine said, we're either going to hope that during the RFP process, they can find a qualified consultant that will do the entire acre, entire area, or hopefully Ancient Burying Ground can make up any of the difference. But I believe we're seeing that the 5,000 is sufficient to cover, and probably will cover the additional.
That was.
So Mary, was the
request.
1 acre limit just a matter of recognizing $5,000 can only go so far?
Yes, partly budgetary, and I don't know if Corey's on the line, but also because this is meant for historic sites and the it's also a matter of keeping the scale manageable. So, or maybe Kathy can speak to that. I see she's on too, but that was sort of a guideline decision that we made.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
give you the confirmation. That is, Mary summarized it very well. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Kathy.
Sarah Nelson?
This is just one of those pesky housekeeping items. And the narrative describes this as basically a subsequent phase of the prior project, but on the checkbox, it says that it's not a subsequent phase, and just to bring those two into alignment with one another, whichever way it is.
And where is that located, that checkbox you're referring to?
It's question 7 on page 4.
Okay. Are you talking about the narrative or the actual application?
So this is the actual application.
Okay, page 4, got it.
But it's
Okay.
page 4
Oh,
of my
okay.
PDF, which has the motion, so it's probably page 3 of your application.
Yeah, so number 7, correct. Is this a subsequent phase of a project? And I had checked yes. Is that correct?
Oh,
It's
Yeah.
PDF we
not,
have says no.
we have it.
Oh,
No.
okay. So my copy says yes.
weird.
Okay.
We, Christine and I did go back and forth a little bit, and I wonder if we inadvertently merged the application with
Yeah,
the narrative. Sorry about that.
right.
I'll be sure to do that final double check next.
Yeah, so I'll resend this one because this is the one signed by the board president.
By Ty, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
all right.
thanks.
Thank you. Sarah, your hand's still raised. Okay. And any further questions? Seeing none, I'll proceed to the vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Vincenzia,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I will abstain. Tom Elmore has recused himself. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
and Sarah Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Jonathan, can you
Thank you.
ask Tom to come back in?
Yes, I can. We'll do that right now.
Thank you. And Leah, you're stepping out for this next item, if she hasn't already.
Yes, it looks like she did step out already.
Okay, thank you. Just wait for Tom to get back in.
Okay, Tom's coming back in. Paul, real quick, I had Beth Burgess as the second for that previous item. Who made the motion?
Sarah Nelson.
Thank you. Okay, Tom's back.
Tom has returned. Okay, thank you. Item 5B2. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act to the state of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Congregation Mishkan Israel, project consulting services of a 36 CFR qualified architect to prepare plans and specifications for a roof replacement for Congregation Mishkan Israel Synagogue building constructed in 1960 at 785 Ridge Road, Hamden, Connecticut. The amount $28,800. Can I have a motion to approve?
Sarah Nelson, so
Hello?
moved.
And second?
Tom?
Discussion.
Okay. So staff recommends approval of this application. Congregation Mishkan Israel just completed a grant-funded condition assessment, and they targeted as their priority need the roof. And so they're coming in with the non-matching ask for plans and specifications, which will be supporting an HRF grant application in the future. As we know, Leah recused herself, but Jill Gottself, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, is one of the architects with the firm that did the condition assessment and proposed the plans and specs. So hopefully she'll be able to answer any questions that I can't.
Mary, just one quick question. What's the grant limit for a survey and planning grant?
Well, the grant
Will
limit
not
for survey
change.
and planning is 20 with a match, but under this particular program, we discussed and agreed that we would raise the cap to 40,000 and not require a match for applications for plans and specifications that are not generated, but are coming in as a result of a grant funded and approved condition assessment, and with the intention of moving on to HRF. So the point of this grant would be to produce the necessary documents that would support an HRF grant application.
Okay, thank you. I lost my video feed, so I'm going to try to get back on that. Does anyone have questions?
I have a question. I guess it's for Mary. Mary, I really like the application. Is there any way that we can get the photographs embedded into the dialogue so we can see the feature while it's being discussed?
I'm sure we can, and I can make that a requirement as I review applications in the future and I'm reading the narrative. Yeah, it's always nice to see the figure that they're referring to, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
And
would
I
be
can
great.
either do
Thanks.
that or I can ask the applicant to try to do that.
Yeah, have them. It'll be easier for them to do it while they're writing, you know, going along instead of trying to insert them later. But that, you know, that's personal preference. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I like to see what I'm reading.
Makes sense. Yeah.
There's a question from Vincenzo.
I was just curious regarding the extent of the architectural services. Is it just the roof, or is there any other work associated or tied to the roof? So, because I saw the pictures and it looks like there's some significant damages to the ceiling walls and the exterior work as attached to the roof itself. So I was curious, what is the extent? And I know that there are other work to be done, but this particular grant, I didn't see, for example, the detailed scope of the actual work. Is it just the roof itself in the gutters, or is it the EPDM plus the interior damage affected by it?
I might ask Jill to jump in a minute, but the condition assessment outlined a whole bunch of needs. And for budgetary purposes and probably doing the roof first before the roof is, or the damage to, you know, the condition of the roof is what's causing a lot of the other deterioration that you're seeing. And so it was agreed that the roof would come first. And so that's the order of work. I am assuming, or I would encourage them to come back for additional grants to do other work as their budget allows.
So yes, I'm Jill Gotthelf, architect for the project, and we're a strong believer, as I'm sure you are, that until we stop the problem, we can't start to do the repairs. And so based on the budget, the decision was to undertake the roof. The roof does include the rotunda, which is a beautiful sheet metal rotunda, and all of the glazing related to it, all of which have led to significant damage in what they hope to restore as their main entry. If you read through the master plan, the goal is to turn the building back to the street and be able to restore that original main entry as a main entry lobby space. So, and as a gathering space. So this application is just for the roof and the rotunda and all the way down to site drainage, because you'll notice there's also a lot of water that's gathering in the basement because of poor drainage from the roof spilling along the edge of the building. So this is to basically provide an envelope that allows them to begin work on the interior.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sarah Nelson? Still muted.
I think you might have been thinking about wall flashings at intersections of roof to wall. Was that part of your question?
Well, typically, and I wasn't 100% clear as to, so is it just the roof design, or because there are, the flashing being one of them, all of the associated components to get the roof to par. It wasn't very clear in the RFP as to the extent of the design work, but I understand what she's saying.
So, Jill, in the context of the phased approach that you and your clients are taking, I am assuming, and again, we don't have huge information, but you would be taking care of any related intersections and flashings associated with the roof in this phase.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where the major portion of the water penetration is at all the junctures between change of levels in the building, between the various roofs of the, it's a complex of buildings, and each of the buildings, you know, are independent, but the roofs intersect. And so this is all roof flashing. It includes all of the window sills, the glazings and seals, you know, the metal roofing, the membrane roofing, so, and drainage, as well as addressing any structural instability or elements that are found for under the roof, insofar as any framing elements and the roof deck. So it's actually a complete roof envelope drainage project. It will include minor repairs as required to any masonry where flashing is connecting. It is not a full masonry project, but if you notice, the issues with the masonry on the building are relatively minor. And so this is really their primary issue.
And that was actually one of the other reasons, besides the flashing, is the masonry. I was not sure if there was any concern of leaks through the masonry wall, but you also addressed that question. So
yeah, they're not, the leaks are not through the wall. They're the leaks, you know, are around the juncture of the masonry where the flashing is embedded into the masonry, but that's really a matter of the flashing that's allowing the water in between the roof and the masonry, and not the masonry itself. The brick masonry is really in sound condition, and the issues that we found in the report with the limestone are really more microbiological growth that has to do with the fact that there's so much water being spilled onto the masonry from the changes that have happened to the gutter system and the roof.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any additional comments or questions from council members? Seeing that there was just one item I noticed in the contract. There was a retainer required that wasn't credited towards the project until the last payment in construction administration. So it's just a cash flow issue for the congregation to be aware of. You know, so it doesn't affect the 28.8 for the actual design work, but it's not something that would be reimbursed if it's a retainer for construction phase services.
Right. We'll have them keep an eye on it. And I will also look at that when they turn in their final financial documents and, you know, with the deliverable. And we'll keep
Great.
Aaron in the loop on that too.
Thank you. All right. If there are no further questions, we'll move to vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Vincenzo,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I will abstain. Tom Elmore,
Aye.
Leah has recused herself. Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
and Sarah Nelson.
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you very much, and wish you
Thank
well
you.
on your project.
Hmm.
Okay, moving on. Could we get Leah back, Jonathan?
Yes, just texted her. Thank you.
Once she rejoins, we'll continue with 5B3.
Okay, Leah's back.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 5B3, Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. Applicant B Foundation, Inc., and the project consulting services of a 36 CFR qualified architect to prepare a conditions assessment for Granite Church built in 1902 at 5 North Main Street, Reading. The amount of the grant is $20,000. Can I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Beth Burgess.
A second?
I'll second it. Tom?
Thank you, Tom. Discussion?
Okay, so staff recommends approval of this application. The applicant has already done a self-funded condition assessment, which was included in the application. However, and they did address some of it, like the water infiltration, but there are other needs that need to be examined, like the roof. And their main concern is that they get a qualified historical architect to look at the building to further examine conditions, just kind of to double check and to make recommendations that meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, so that moving forward, they have a roadmap for preservation purposes and hopefully to come in for other grants from us. Richard Wenning of the B Foundation is here, and also Darren Raymondlock, who was a consultant on the application. who can answer more questions if I can't.
Mary, I'll just start with one question. So the original assessment that was prepared by Hoffman, did a fairly thorough job of identifying issues, but are they almost at the stage where it would be better to go into plans and specs for addressing in further detail some of these conditions? Because I'm just wondering if putting money to get a new report with some, guesstimate numbers on it, if they're really ready to move forward with actually implementing roof repairs and repointing and things like that. Having a statement saying you need to do roof repairs and repointing, is that the best value at this stage, that they can actually just start moving into actually implementing some of those big picture items, especially with their adaptive reuse, knowing how they want to use things. Is anything going to be impacted by their desired uses for any of this work? So I'm just wondering if taking a step backward to do another more detailed conditions assessment would get them to where they need to be at the stage, or if they're ready just to say, let's build upon the broad outline that was described previously, and then actually jump further ahead so they can get actual bids and on some of those specific items.
That is a great idea that I had not even considered, but it does make sense now that you mention it. I think, and the applicant is here, and I imagine they might welcome, being able to kind of move a little bit further forward rather than reposition themselves. So that definitely bears a conversation with them.
Mary?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Darren Newman-Locke, principal of Sawdust and Strata. I'm the consultant that submitted this application. Part of the reason that B Foundation wanted to go for another survey and planning grant for a conditions assessment is because when Hoffman reviewed the building, there were a number of things that they didn't look at very closely, one of which was the roof structure, which the applicant knew had some issues, and they've kind of patched the roof structure, but it needs some closer inspection. Also, there was no lead and asbestos checking in the attic. The bell and that structure needs to be fully inspected. There were a number of things that weren't looked at very closely. In addition, they have done some work on dealing with the water infiltration, and they just want to make sure that is no longer an issue. So that's why they elected to go for the conditions assessment again.
Okay, Beth Ackley, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, and actually my comment segues pretty well into this, which is that I have been working on another Northrop building and know of a third one. The one I've been working on is on Nantucket. The third one is here in Connecticut. And they all have similar issues that I know of. And one is that the granite tends to trap moisture behind it. And so I would suggest that taking it says in Hoffman's report that the masonry is in pretty good shape, but there is one photo showing kind of a sandy mortar joint coming out, and that's what we were finding, is that the facing mortar joints looked okay, but once we pulled some of the granite out, the backup was in tough shape. So I would suggest that taking a look at that as part of a conditions assessment would probably be a wise idea.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Sarah Nelson?
Beth, this is just to tag on to your comment. Your advice to this particular owner would be some investigative demolition as part of the conditions assessment to yield the information that you found in these other buildings.
Yes, or I don't know if Hoffman got up on a lift in the tower or any high areas, but certainly some sounding of the masonry to start to see. At least the building on Nantucket, it's got a veneer stone And then the tower backup, which looks really similar to the tower backup here, is rubble. And then there was a pretty big slush joint in the middle, and the three wides were not tied together very well. So yeah, probably building in some investigation or some, some probing, but could potentially sort of have that as an alternate and start with a lift investigation and some sounding.
Hi, this is Darren Raymond Locke again. I don't think that they got up on a lift. Which
Okay.
is part of the reason we came back for a conditions assessment.
Yeah.
That whole roof structure has not been, anything on a higher area has not been checked thoroughly, I believe.
Yeah. So smart to, I think, investigate that. Yep.
So Mary, when they write their RFP, instead of the typical, conditions assessment that we would look at A to Z kind of conditions, ask them to be very specific about, taking it to the next level. So it's understood that it's a deeper dive into some specific issues rather than a general, we know we're going to replace systems to accommodate their future uses and things like that. But it's an additive rather than a step back and rehashing of similar assessments.
Got it.
And just a general comment, there's another congregational church in the Trumbull Center that appears to be by the same architect, and it's the same floor plan, a little bit different detailing on the tower, but just kind of an interesting observation that there's another one that looks almost identical, not too far away. Any other questions?
Paul,
Hearing none.
sorry. Paul, sorry. I have a
Tom?
question. I have a question as a general question after we vote on this application. It's
Okay.
It doesn't have anything to do with this specific application, but it does with churches.
All right. Thank you, Tom. So go to our roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Vincenzia,
Aye.
you're muted. Oh, thank you.
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I'll abstain. Tom Elmore,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
and Sarah Nelson.
Aye. Great.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank
Good luck
you.
with your projects. Tom,
My
General
question
comment.
has to do with, is there anything in the building code, and this is more for the architects and the engineers on the council, is there anything in the building code that suggests or recommends or requires lightning protection? And the reason, on churches specifically, and the reason why I ask is Massachusetts just lost a beautiful historic wooden church. They assume it was from a lightning strike, and it was in flames, totally engulfed within an hour, and maybe on the ground in 3. And I know that we have a lot of church applications in front of us, but, I'm sure that budget item is, not cheap. But I don't know what the feeling or what the sense is on requesting, requiring, or just staying away from that conversation.
I know that they changed recently the NEC code, which is for the electrical, maybe a couple of years ago, 2020, 2021. So, one of the things that we always recommend is if you are not 100% sure, you want to get a consultant engineer, electrical engineer, to come in and assess the building and sort of check with the newest code compliance. And it varies for the different towns too.
Beth Ackley.
It might be, I'm not actually sure about the code, but as a sort of matter of being stewards to the long-term preservation of these buildings, maybe that's something we could include in our reviews of, not necessarily like a technical review, but a encouragement of people to either incorporate as part of their bid documents or in their future projects, or, to check what they have. Just keep that in mind, to think about that and comment on it as we're reviewing applications.
Thank you. Okay. Any additional comments or questions for Tom? If not, we'll move along to item 5B4, the Certified Local Government Grant. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a Certified Local Government Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant funded by the Historic Preservation Fund of the Department of the Interior, National Park Service to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All federal and state grant guidelines and requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant is the City of Stamford, and the project informational brochure summarizing regulations and incentives for historic preservation projects. The amount of the grant is $6,000. Can I have a motion to approve the item?
I'll make the motion to approve it.
And a second?
This is Sarah. I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion?
So staff recommends approval of this application. It's important for a certified local government to make sure that property owners are aware of not just local and state and federal regulations, but also any incentives that are provided by the state or federal government or the locality itself. So educational brochures like this are encouraged. David Woods, who's the chair of the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission in Stamford, is here to answer questions that I can't.
Hello.
Hello, Sarah Nelson.
Thank you, Paul. It's not a question. I think that this is an incredibly worthy endeavor for public outreach and education. My only comment is in all of the material that gets put together, perhaps a reference to the Connecticut State Building Code, which does offer special consideration for designated historic properties, because oftentimes, particularly homeowners, their first interaction is with contractors who will just make a blanket statement, oh, it's not allowed by the code, but it's a much more nuanced conversation when we're dealing with a historic building.
That's great. I will make sure not just for this, but we have funded other educational materials like that, and in our office we do talk about the state building code accommodations, but that's one that I don't think has made its way into local educational material. So great.
Andy Horowitz.
Hi, I have a specific question and a general question for this proposal, which I very much like. One is, I saw that there's funding for targeted mailings. Is this going out to property owners? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just making sure that I didn't know.
Unless I'm wrong, that's what I.
Okay. That makes. I was gonna
But
just say, because it seems like encountering the brochure, like out and about in Stamford, is not the best way to get this information to people who are going to use it. The most effective thing to do is to send it to people that own the building, who may or may not live in Stamford. My second question was just more general. This is such a good idea, and I lack the institutional knowledge. Why do we not, or do we, have we ever, has the council ever just sent this to everybody? Is there not a brochure like this for the state? Like, why is this happening in Stamford and not other places? Why is this the first application like this I'm seeing? That's because it seems like this is something the council would want to support more generally. Yeah,
I'll speak first, but then you all can discuss. We have funded things like this. They kind of vary between what it means to live in a local district, or what financial incentives. And as a matter of fact, and I don't know, Jonathan might mention this later, but there was a statewide working group for historic preservation, and one of the recommendations that came out of that was a toolkit, which would be super comprehensive. So that is coming down the pike, but This is definitely something that our federal program encourages, and the council has funded a number of times, so. Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Leah?
Yeah, I know that there used to be, but now all the logos are like defunct, and the name, I think it maybe was under culture and tourism. There used to be a brochure explaining all those benefits very generally, because I still have copies in my office, but it's pretty outdated. And then the other thing is, just I think even more critical than homeowners is almost real estate agents in Stamford, because people who buy these houses have no idea, and it's really frustrating. So
yeah, that is an ongoing concern and frustration on our part as well.
And Mary, I'll just chime in. It would be great if they had a PDF version of this brochure, so when the 1,000 copies are gone, they can just blanket email it. The whole benefit of putting all these things together is how well you can distribute that information. So in addition to their scope that's including it on the website, just having something that when somebody does inquire, they can just blitz off an email with the attachment, and they'll get a lot more mileage out of that as well. There's one technical question I had about their districts. They have their inventory of cultural resources that are a basis for properties within Stamford that are eligible. Is that equivalent to the historic resources inventory that many municipalities have undertaken in the past?
That is what I think it is, unless it's, just by another name. But David, is that something separate then? Because Stamford has a number of his, basic historic resources inventories under their belt. You're muted.
David, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
There.
There you go.
Muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I think the intent was that any inventories that we do, and we've done a number of them over the years, would be separate from this brochure. And I would like to indicate the previous question about who this gets distributed to. We have a number of districts that are historic districts in Stamford, and one in particular is under very dynamic change, and that's the South End. So the original intent of the brochure was really to target the South End at first, because there's so much development going on. This is everything south of Highway 95 and the railroad tracks out to Long Island Sound. There are developers building very large buildings, as you probably know. And we have in the zoning code, we have a 7.3 section, which is allowing historic bonuses. And we're finding many of these people who live in the South End don't understand the 7.3 section of the code and what the options are for them. So that was one of the original directions for this. And yes, we do want to send it out to everyone, but I think we'll target the audience to South End first. Yes, the real estate brokers, the developers, and then spread it around the community.
Thank you. Andy, your hand is still up. If didn't know if you had another question.
I did just again, by way of admiring this proposal, is there some way that we can hear back about what methods? You just laid out a couple different things you're going to do and a couple different constituencies you're going to try to reach. I think it might be useful for us to hear what had the most bang for your buck in getting the word out, who came in to apply. And then I noticed there's, around 3,000, around half the budget is stuff that may or may not be shareable with other communities? Like if, if you make a nice brochure, is it possible for the, not the sealed PDF, but whatever, for the design to be shared with anyone else who wants to do this so they can plug in their own local, whatever their local situation is, but a lot of it's going to be common across the state, and that may save some money, may make it a lower barrier to entry for other districts that would like to pursue a similar idea.
Yes, absolutely. The more we understand and the more information we get out, it's good to share it with everybody, anybody we can, and to help them. And we're all in the historic preservation and cultural resource business together.
Yeah, I'm just imagining you make a nice brochure. Maybe we can give the template to someone else and make it easier for them to do the same.
Yeah, we in fact have done some research, and we've gathered brochures from various communities around the country, because one of the things that we started looking at was whether or not this is sort of an architectural guidelines brochure. I think we backed away from it, making it specifically an architectural guidelines kind of thing, because there are other entities in the city that can do that. But we don't have an architectural review commission in Stamford, and the Historic Preservation Advisory Commission is sort of bridging a gap between architectural review and historic preservation, and then also adding things to our new cultural resources inventory.
Thank you. Tom, do you have a question?
Paul, yeah, I guess I have a statement with regard to what David just said. David, you talked about guidelines. One of the things that happens when towns and communities put these guidelines together, that people that put them together perceive them to be requirements.
Yeah.
And there's a big definition difference between a requirement and a guideline. And, I've been asked over the years to prepare landscape guidelines, and I won't do it because somebody can meet every one of those guidelines and the design can still be absolutely horrible.
Right.
And then they can just stand up there and say, deny me, and I'll see you in court. So just be careful the way you phrase things and understand that these are ideas or suggestions versus requirements. But if they're requirements, then you got to stick to your guns on that.
Yes, I'm in total agreement. We, and that's one of the reasons why we backed off from it being architectural guideline brochure. Years ago, I worked on a commission as a volunteer with the Downtown Special Services District that we have in Stamford. And we actually put out guidelines for storefronts. And there was a lot of resistance to it. And the document got really watered down, but it was eventually sent out. And it did become a way for DSSD to give a new store or owner or a shop operator some idea of how to make their store look good in the community. So from that point of view, it tended to work, but it really didn't go much further than that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? If none, we'll move to a vote. Beth Hackley,
Aye.
Vincentia,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
I'll abstain. Tom Elmore,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sharon Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, and
Thank
we
you.
look forward to seeing what you pull together. At this time, I think our next agenda item is item 11, the report on State Historic Preservation Office. Turn it over to Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. Jonathan Kinney with the SHPO. Number of things to go over with you quickly today. The first is I just wanted to update you on our HPC membership. Since our last meeting, I have been in contact again with the governor's office and have notified them of Paul being moved up to the chair position. And Tom, they did confirm that Tom notified them stepping down from the chair and remaining on council as a member. So those changes are in the works. And also paperwork for what I'm hoping will be the newest member to the HPC, who is Miss Deanna Rhodes, the Director of Planning and Neighborhood Services in the City of Norwich. Her paperwork is in, so we're just waiting to hear confirmation back from them. It'll be good to get another person with some planning experience and municipal experience as well onto the council. The next item I have is Paul had asked for a few updates on the legislative session, so I wanted to give you a brief overview of the bill that I'm sure you've all seen, which started as House Bill 6756 regarding our office. So just wanted to give you a quick update. As I said, the original language that came out earlier this year in this bill was essentially to establish a procedure of appeals of determinations made by our office. The language came out of the Commerce Committee earlier in the spring, and we were hearing that the impression was that the SHPO had swung too far to the side of preservation at the expense of economic development. And the language in the bill was incredibly vague. It essentially could have, as written, applied to any of our programs, tax credits, environmental review, grant designations. We simply didn't know. So one of our primary concerns at that point was that this could potentially conflict with both the existing state legislation because we operate within these larger programs and processes, and also our federal responsibilities from the National Park Service. How would a state appeal process fold into those federal processes? So in an effort to sort of dive in and clarify the issues, SHPO staff, myself, Liz Shapiro, DECD's government affairs staff had a number of meetings with the chairs of the Commerce Committee, as well as several constituents. And during those conversations, we were able to sort of zero in and identify the specific areas of concern, which was essentially that folks were experiencing some pain points or confusion related to their regulatory obligations as part of the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, otherwise known as SEPA. Now, this is not the SEPA that Council is involved in with from time to time. This is not the Protection Act. This is the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, which is very similar to a state-level version of the national NEPA law. So it's an environmental review law, essentially. So in these subsequent conversations with the Commerce chairs, we talked about a potential working group to sort of open up SEPA and discuss the process comprehensively with people who are applicants to the process, state agencies who are responsible for compliance and or oversight of the process. And, you know, during those conversations, it became pretty clear that there was not going to be an appetite for opening up SEPA in total. But that we could agree to a more focused conversation on identifying potential improvements to the statutes or regulations as they pertain to historic preservation review within that larger process. So essentially, we've come from this sort of amorphous appeals officer process to a conversation about potential ways to improve what is essentially our little piece of a much larger law, with the understanding that there are concerns and issues outside of our little piece of that issue that will need to be addressed, and we hope to make the people in the working group aware of those issues as part of that discussion. But that bill has passed both the House and the Senate and is included in the budget. So that will be moving forward, and I suspect that the appointments to that group will be made as the summer moves on. One other additional legislative item there that Mary just mentioned briefly, there was $50,000 that was allocated to DECD to develop a historic preservation toolkit. And this essentially came out of the working group that wrapped up its work last winter that was exploring two sort of resources for municipalities and nonprofits that were working to preserve resources. The first piece was an exploration of the potential use of a revolving loan fund in Connecticut. And then the other path was this historic preservation toolkit, which the working group envisioned as sort of a one-stop shop, either document or website. Ideally, I think it's both, where somebody could go to get information on historic preservation funding in the state, historic preservation, just technical guidance, information. One of the really cool things that was recommended by the group is sort of these situational roadmaps, where you'd have a section for historic property owners. What do I do if I need to fix my roof? Is there funding available for that? What if I'm an advocate in a municipality? I'm interested in starting a local preservation movement or commission in town. How do I do that? I'm a nonprofit and I own a historic building. So sort of trying to encompass all, we'll never encompass all the potential situations, but trying to provide people with a roadmap and sort of this one document that they could look at and have a lot of answers, questions answered for them. Any questions on any of that so far? All right. And then the rest of the information I have for you guys today is sort of a little bit more housekeeping related. We had mentioned at the last meeting the possibility of doing quarterly hybrid meetings, which I'm fully in support of. And I wanted to talk to the group about whether or not August might work as the first one of those. Are a lot of people away in August? I'm happy to sort of set that up. I'd be interested in moving forward with that plan, since I received some seemed like a pretty good amount of support from council for moving to that format.
Jonathan, this is Tom. I have a question. Can you please describe for us how you envision seeing that working?
The hybrid meetings?
Yeah.
Sure. So we've done it for State Review Board meeting a few times now. The folks who are interested in coming in person, we meet in a conference room. There's a camera and a microphone in the center of the table. Essentially, we would be broadcasting that to the audience. Members who were not able to attend that month could still participate remotely, just as you are now. It would be up on the screen in the middle of the room. So you'd have some folks attending in person, some folks who were not able to attend in person, attending remotely. Does that clarify for you, Tom? Sure.
It does. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And Jonathan, that would just be for council members having to come in person, not applicants, correct?
That is how we've done it so far, but I don't see a reason why applicants could not attend in person if they wanted to.
Yeah. As long as it's optional for them, because people coming in from all over the state, it's
of course.
Their, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I sort of, we want to ease into this,
option.
so everything's going to be optional at first. I just, we're just going to test it out, see how it goes.
If it helps for feedback, I am available for in-person on the August 2nd meeting.
Okay, great. Well, hearing no objections, I think I may offer that up as an option. And obviously leading up to that, I will be communicating with council, talking about logistics, talking about how we'll get that all rolling. But that's great to hear. I look forward to meeting the folks that I haven't met in person.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. I will set that up for August. And then two additional items very quickly. The first is the July meeting, which is unfortunately on July 5th, the day after the holiday. And I wanted to talk to council about whether or not you were interested in potentially bumping that back a week, or SHPO staff can simply attempt to get you the material a bit earlier than usual. Try to get you information maybe the week before the one we'd usually do, to give you a little bit more time for review, so you're not doing that over the holiday weekend. I will throw that out to council for discussion or questions or anything.
So Jonathan, I'll be on vacation from July 3rd to the 14th.
Okay.
Out of the country.
And I'll also be out of the country during July. So Tom had asked or offered to host if we were going to have a meeting. And I guess that was still up in the air last time we talked as to whether or not there was going to be a meeting.
It was up in the air, and it looks like we did have to bump some things back that were going to be on this month's agenda. So we are planning to have a July meeting at this point.
I am also not going to be available on the 5th, but I could be available if we bumped it back a week.
Okay.
Can I ask what's easier for staff?
Yeah.
Yes. I believe a lot of the material that we would have to send out, we've got here in the office already, because there were some applications that were, as I talked about last time, are being a little bit more strategic. So I think we have a lot of the applications. What I can do is talk to staff and follow up with an email to council and sort of poll you guys and see how we want to handle that. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, and Jonathan, just so you know, I can be available for either the 5th or the 12th, whatever that is.
12.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
it's
I
fine.
knew it was the day after the holiday. It's a big one, so I wanted to make sure that we at least had that conversation. And I will I'll follow up with some emails to council, and we can confirm that. And then the last thing I had was for all of council. I know there were some technical issues with the link to the OneDrive this month. So I just wanted to sort of clarify, the link to the OneDrive is the same link each month. It's just to the HPC folder. It links you directly to that folder, and then the subfolders will be located in there. What I'm going to do next month is I'm going to reshare the link with everyone. And what I would recommend doing is taking the link and bookmarking it in your browser, and then you'll have that bookmark. You just click on that, it will bring you to that same link every time. And hopefully that will avoid the need to reshare every month. And I apologize for that confusion. But I will, once I send that link out for the next meeting, I will also make a note in the email to recommend bookmarking that in your browser so you can just refer back to that link at each month. And that's all I have. So unless there are any questions, I'll turn it back to Paul.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Next item is report on museum properties, item 12. Liz?
Hi. Okay, a couple things. Good to see everybody. Let's see. Announcements, I've been talking about Good to Great. Announcements of the Good to Great grants are going to be made next week. And I have a meeting today with the commissioner who's taken a real interest in this program, as has the governor, which is really interesting. And sometimes it's a little tricky to go from people not taking any interest in your programs to people taking an interest in your programs, but it's a good thing overall. But it's brought up a lot of more questions. So I just want to give a special shout out to Todd, Jonathan, and Melissa Diaz for working really hard to support this program, which we are administering with Connecticut Humanities Help this year. Just in general, the museums, they're open and operating with seasonal help. We actually ended up with 9 people. So we had 12 that we were making offers to. We lost 3, but we do have 9, and all 9 seem to be really working out. So we're really happy about that. They have a varied skill set, and they'll be working varied hours. And this is the most staff we've ever had as seasonal staff. So the greatest number. So that's exciting. Very pleased, if you haven't seen it yet, or if you haven't heard about it yet, 3 of our 4 museums have appeared on Connecticut Magazine's Amazing Hidden Gem Connecticut Museums. 42 under the radar cultural centers, just waiting to be discovered. That was the subtitle. And that's really exciting for museums throughout Connecticut. So I couldn't be more pleased about that. I'm sure Leah is also jumping up and down with joy about this. The little things that really are so great for our cultural organizations. And also I wanted just to let you know that it's been great. We have a new marketing director at DECD, and he's also the acting director of tourism. His name is Anthony. Tourism is planning on, they're out on the road on a road show in the next 2 weeks, but they have been extremely supportive of the work that we're doing, and all sort of culture, historical sites, arts organizations. They are very interested in actually helping to make it easier to promote those organizations. So super happy about that. Quick items of interest over at Newgate. On Thursday, we have our first meeting with SHPO staff and museum staff and the contractors GNCB for the stabilization of the 4-story cell block, which is taking place right now. And that's part of the Save America, 250th. No, Save America's Treasures. Sorry, I get confused about which grants. It's part of a federal grant that we received for to help go ahead and do that. And that is going to make a huge difference in terms of access and safety on the site. We've also been able to move ahead with a contract that's finally been approved by the AG's office for review of the stability and geological conditions in the mine. It was last done, it's over 10 years ago. We've been trying to get this contract approved for 5 years. And so this is very necessary work. And the good thing about finally having this approved is we have a path forward so that we can actually get onto a regular schedule without jumping through hoops every time this needs to be done, which is on a regular schedule. At the Eric Sloan Museum, June 10th, this weekend is Touch of Trade Day with the Antique Tools and Trades in Connecticut group. Their acronym is ATTIC. Every time I see it, I can't remember what they stand for some reason, because I just picture an attic. But we're gonna have 8 trade presenters and 10 to 15 tool vendors on the grounds of the museum. So that's really exciting. And talking about museums doing things that are maybe not non-traditional, there's certainly museums do everything now. But over at the Eric Sloan Museum, they're going to be staffing a booth at the farmers market in Kent on Friday afternoons. And we're really excited about that. We'll have an activity and they'll preview Saturday special events and just give some, become more involved in the Kent community. That's the goal. At the Henry Whitfield Museum, we're going to be presenting live music to celebrate Make Music Day. But instead of having it on June 21st, which is a Wednesday, we're going to be hosting the group on Saturday, June 18th, which is Father's Day, from 1 to 3 p.m. And the band is called Serious Coyote. When I'm done, I'll pop their website into the chat in case you're looking for some cool music. They seem really, really neat. And finally, let's see, over at the Crandall Museum, curator Joan DiMartino presented at the Connecticut League of Museums annual conference on Monday to talk about 3D tours that we continue to sort of upgrade at all of our museums. She's speaking specifically about the tours at the Crandall Museum and at Old Newgate Prison. We're still waiting for the final tweaks on the exhibit labels. They've been designed. We've seen the layout. Everything is looking very close to being good. So hopefully sometime in July, we'll get those. And then in June, and sorry about that, you guys. In June and July, the museum is going to be hosting mindfulness in the Peace Garden with a wellness educator, a nurse practitioner, Robin Thompson, and museum curator, Joni DiMartino. And so a group of pre-registered, it's free, but you need to pre-register, will gather for 6 weeks in a series of mindfulness sessions that are inspired by themes of peace, community, strength, and other topics related to the 1830s events at the Canterbury Female Boarding School. So that's new for us, and we're really excited about that as well. So lots of things happening. It's a little tricky to keep up with everything that's going on because everybody is so busy, but I would welcome any of you to visit the museums this summer, and just let me know, let me know, or just show up and introduce yourself when you get there. Does anyone have any questions? Thanks.
Liz, thanks so much. I was wondering about Connecticut Open House Day.
Yeah, I actually saw recently that they have sent out an email about it that came from tourism. And it is happening, and it may be this weekend, Beth.
It is this weekend.
It is this weekend. Okay. Yes, so I was away on vacation for 2 weeks, so I'm sort of still like, it is June and it is June 10th coming up. So is the question about, are the museums participating or?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. All the museums participate. They're all open free this weekend. And, even at the Eric Sloan Museum for the special event, that's going to be
perfect.
A free event. So yeah, we try to do as much as we can to participate, support tourism.
Great. Thank you and welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any new business? I don't have anything on the list. Item 14, item 15, liaison with public and private agencies. Do we have Jane with us today?
I do not see Jane on the list there, Paul.
Okay. Any other public comments from anyone?
I do know that Connecticut Preservation Action was working, to support the SHPO negotiations about the legislation, sort of the attacks on legislation. So that's, there's been several meetings ready to, launch grassroots, if it's necessary at some point, and also work on getting together a caucus at some point of legislators who actually support and understand preservation.
Thank you, Leah. As we mentioned, we'll confirm the next meeting, either the 5th or the 12th of July.
Yes.
And thank you in advance, Tom, for chipping in on that one while I'm away. If there's no other business, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank
Second.
you, Tom.
Well, second.
Second? Thank you,
Leah.
Leah. Thank you all, and wish you a pleasant holiday, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.